Why Israeli farmers grow vegetables 3x faster than you. What is truly fascinating about Israeli farmers? They aren't just growing vegetables, they are engineering time. While you're out there every weekend struggling with a hose, buying expensive fertilizers, and fighting a losing battle against pests, Israeli growers are harvesting crops 3 times faster than you on the same patch of dirt. And often, it's dirt that started as barren desert sand. This isn't just about fancy equipment, it's about a radical shift in how we define a garden. The truth is, you've been taught to garden backwards. You've designed a high-maintenance battlefield that requires constant human intervention just to survive. Israeli farmers, born from the necessity of surviving in a water-scarce nation, have instead designed self-regulating ecosystems. They don't just plant seeds, they build living machines. In this guide, I'm going to show you exactly why your current approach keeps you trapped in a cycle of endless maintenance, and how the Israeli integrated ecosystem model eliminates 80% of the labor while tripling your harvest speed. We aren't just talking about innovation, we're talking about stopping the fight against nature and starting to manage its potential through observation and smart design. Let's pull back the curtain on exactly what you're doing wrong. And trust me, it's not your fault. It's the way we've been conditioned to think about agriculture for over a century. Every single weekend, you head out to your backyard with a plan that looks more like a military parade than a living system. You plant neat, isolated rows, tomatoes in one bed, carrots in another, and lettuce over there by itself, separated by wide aisles of bare, brown soil. You think you're being organized. In reality, you are creating a high-stress environment that is doomed to be slow and inefficient. You spend hours watering each crop individually, adjusting your nozzle for every section. You fertilize each block when the leaves start to yellow, hoping the nutrients actually reach the roots. You spend your afternoons on your hands and knees, pulling weeds from that bare soil between your plants. You are exhausted, your back aches, and yet your harvest is still weeks behind where it should be. Why? Because you are gardening like a factory manager, not a biological systems engineer. Western agriculture and the suburban gardening culture that followed it taught you to grow monocultures, single species plantings that are fundamentally lonely and competitive. When you plant 20 tomato plants in a row, you are forcing them to compete for the exact same nutrients at the exact same soil depth. You've created a massive gap of empty dirt between them that acts as a VIP nursery for weeds, which evolved specifically to colonize bare earth. You are essentially paying for fertilizer and water, only to have half of it consumed by the weeds you'll have to pull next week. Now, look at the Israeli approach. They realized decades ago that nature never plants in rows. Think about it. When you walk through a lush oasis or a resilient forest, do you see organized lines of a single species? Do you see bare soil anywhere? Of course not. You see a chaotic, beautiful density, dozens of plant species occupying the same square meter. Their roots are at different depths, their leaves are at different heights, and they are interlocked in symbiotic relationships that have functioned for millennia without a single human intervention. This is the operating system that Israeli farmers have digitized and optimized. They don't grow plants in isolation, they grow plant communities. In an Israeli-style integrated bed, you won't find empty dirt. You'll find a green carpet where every species plays a specific role that accelerates the growth of its neighbor. While your isolated tomato is struggling to find enough nitrogen because its 19 neighbors are grabbing it all, the Israeli farmer has planted nitrogen-fixing legumes right at the base of the tomato. By eliminating the factory layout, they eliminate the competition. They've replaced neat rows with stacked functions. You are losing 3 times the speed because your plants are fighting each other for survival. Their plants are collaborating for growth. You are using 3 times the space because you've been taught to fear clutter, when in fact, that clutter is the very engine of rapid growth. The bare soil in your garden is a leak in your system. A leak of moisture, a leak of nutrients, and a leak of your precious time. Now we arrive at the heart of the Israeli miracle, biological automation. This is the stage where you stop being a laborer and start being an architect. If part 2 was about the why, part 3 is about the how. Speed in gardening doesn't come from dumping more synthetic chemicals onto your plants or watering them until the soil turns to mud. It comes from designing a system where plants meet each other's needs automatically, 24 hours a day, without you lifting a finger. In the Israeli model, they utilize a concept called functional stacking, which is often combined with their world-renowned precision fertigation, a mix of irrigation and fertilization. While you are manually feeding your plants a one-size-fits-all fertilizer, the Israeli farmer has designed an underground biological marketplace that never sleeps. They're one, the underground nitrogen factory. Consider the relationship between nitrogen fixers and heavy feeders. In your garden, you might plant beans in June, harvest them, and then plant corn later. You're thinking linearly. The Israeli farmer plants them simultaneously. They utilize specialized bacteria nodules, specifically rhizobium, that live on the roots of legumes. These bacteria pull nitrogen gas directly from the air and convert it into ammonia, a form of liquid gold for plants. In your isolated rows, the nitrogen produced by a bean plant stays with that bean plant. But in a dense Israeli polyculture, that nitrogen leaks out into the common soil zone. The neighboring leafy greens or fruiting tomatoes plug into this supply. This isn't just a minor boost. It's like giving your plants a permanent, slow-release IV drip of the most essential nutrient for growth. This is why their plants grow at a sprinting pace while yours are merely walking. 2. The multi-tiered root architecture. One of the biggest secrets to tripling harvest speed is vertical root partitioning. In your factory garden, you likely plant crops with similar root depths together. This creates a resource traffic jam 10 centimeters below the surface. Israeli growers stack their crops based on root niches. The surface dwellers, 0 to 5 centimeters, like lettuce or strawberries, which act as a living mulch to keep the soil cool and moist. The mid-range explorers, 10 to 30 centimeters, like peppers or beans, which stabilize the soil structure. The deep divers, 40 centimeters plus, like carrots or certain herbs, which reach deep into the subsoil to mine minerals like phosphorus and potassium that surface plants can't reach. Because these plants aren't fighting for the same shelf in the soil pantry, they can be planted 3 times closer together. This density creates a microclimate that prevents evaporation. In the Israeli heat, water is the limiting factor for speed. By shading the soil with a living carpet, they keep soil temperatures 10 degrees cooler, allowing the biology, the fungi and bacteria, to work at peak efficiency through the hottest part of the day. 3. Strategic companion defense. In your garden, pests find your crops because you've built them a giant neon sign. In Israel, they use scent masking and trap cropping. They might surround a high-value crop like tomatoes with a shield of basil, marigolds, and onions. The pungent aromatic compounds from the basil confuse the sensory systems of moths and aphids. Furthermore, they use succession symbiosis. For example, they might plant radishes and carrots in the exact same hole. The radish germinates in 48 hours and matures in just 25 days. Its thick, aggressive root drills through compacted soil like a biological jackhammer. By the time you harvest the radish, it has left behind a pre-drilled, nutrient-rich tunnel for the much slower, more delicate carrot root to expand into. The carrot doesn't have to waste energy fighting the soil. It simply glides down the pre-made path, growing straighter and faster than any carrot in a monoculture row ever could. Number 4, the TechBio hybrid, precision fertigation. Finally, we must mention the Israeli hardware. While the biology provides the framework, their drip irrigation systems provide the pulse. Instead of a flood and drought cycle, where you drench the soil and then let it dry out for days, their systems deliver microscopic amounts of water and nutrients directly to the root zone every hour. This keeps the plant in a state of constant luxury. The plant never has to stress about where its next drink is coming from, so it never stops growing. When you combine this 24/7 nutrient delivery with the biological cooperation of polyculture, you create a turbocharged growth environment. Your plants are taking naps during the heat of the day or when the soil gets too dry. Israeli plants are on a 24-hour production schedule. This is where the Israeli model truly shatters the traditional gardening paradigm. In your current system, you are likely trapped in an export-import cycle that is both expensive and exhausting. Think about your routine. At the end of the season, you pull out your spent plants, haul them away to a compost pile, or worse, a green waste bin, and then you drive to a store to buy heavy bags of compost or fertilizer to replace what you just took. You are physically removing the very lifeblood of your soil, paying for the labor of moving it, and then paying again to buy a processed version of it back. Israeli farmers view this as a massive systemic failure. In a country where every gram of organic matter is precious, they have perfected the chop and drop method, a technique that turns your garden into a self-filling bank account of nutrients. 1. The living soil versus dead dirt. To understand why this makes plants grow 3 times faster, we have to look at the microbial highway. In your traditional garden, after you harvest and clear a bed, the soil sits bare. This exposes it to the sun, which bakes the top layer, killing the delicate fungi and bacteria that actually feed your plants. Without living roots or organic cover, the soil biology goes dormant or dies. When you finally plant something new and toss in some store-bought fertilizer, you get a temporary spike in growth, but the engine, the soil biology, is broken. The Israeli farmer never lets the engine stop. When a crop like fava beans or kale finishes its cycle, they don't pull it out by the roots. Pulling the roots out is like performing surgery on the soil without anesthesia. Naturally occurring fungal networks, mycorrhizae, are ripped apart and carbon is released into the atmosphere. Instead, they simply chop the plant at the base. Number 2, the in situ composting revolution. The green material, the leaves and stems, is dropped directly onto the soil surface as a mulch. This is chop and drop. The surface layer. The dropped material acts as an immediate thermal blanket, protecting the soil from UV rays and keeping the moisture in. The root zone. Because the roots are left in the ground to die and decay, they create microscopic tunnels. As they rot, they provide a slow-release feast for deep soil microbes. The nitrogen release. If the chopped plant was a legume, those nitrogen-filled nodules we talked about in Part 3 don't get thrown in the trash. They stay in the soil, releasing a nitric bomb of fertility exactly where the next plant's roots will be. This creates a continuous fertility loop. Like, while your plants are waiting for you to get around to fertilizing them, the Israeli farmers' plants are growing in a bed that is getting richer every single day. The soil isn't just a medium to hold the plant up. It's a living digestive system. The 3, scaling the wisdom, from deserts to high-tech greenhouses. In large-scale Israeli operations, this isn't just done by hand. They use specialized machinery that shreds crop residues and reincorporates them into the topsoil immediately after harvest. They've discovered that this organic residue increases the cation exchange capacity, C, of the soil. Basically, it increases the soil's ability to hold on to the nutrients provided by their drip irrigation systems. In your garden, when it rains or when you overwater, your expensive liquid fertilizers wash away into the groundwater. In an Israeli-style chop-and-drop bed, the high organic matter acts like a biological sponge, grabbing those nutrients and holding them in the root zone. This is why their vegetables don't just grow faster, they are more nutrient-dense. They aren't just drinking sugar water, synthetic NPK, they are eating from a complex, mineral-rich buffet. The 4, the time vortex of succession planting. Because the soil is never cleared and the fertility is always being built, Israeli farmers can practice instant succession. In your garden, you might harvest, wait a week to clear the bed, wait another week to buy compost, and then replant. That's 2 weeks of zero production. An Israeli grower harvests a head of lettuce, chops the outer leaves back into the soil, and transplants a new seedling into the exact same spot within 60 seconds. The new seedling immediately plugs into the existing fungal networks left behind by the previous plant. There is no transplant shock because the soil biology is already active and the buffet is already open. By eliminating the downtime between crops and accelerating the nutrient cycle through chop and drop, they effectively squeeze 3 growing seasons into the time it takes you to finish one. Now we reach the defensive and spatial masterclass of the Israeli model. In a traditional garden, you are likely playing a game of whack-a-mole with pests. You see a hornworm, you pick it off, you see aphids, you spray. You are reacting to a problem that your garden's design actually invited. Israeli farmers, however, use ecological camouflage and stacked functions to make their gardens invisible to enemies and hyperproductive for themselves. 1. Breaking the scent beacon. Most garden pests don't have great eyesight. They navigate by smelling their favorite food. When you plant a long, straight row of tomatoes, you are essentially creating a giant scent beacon that can be detected from miles away. It is an all-you-can-eat buffet with a neon sign. Israeli farmers utilize the confusion matrix. By interplanting high-value crops with aromatic shields like onions, garlic, marigolds, and pungent herbs, they create a wall of competing volatile organic compounds, VOCs. When a moth flies over an Israeli polyculture bed, its sensory system is overwhelmed. It can't find the signal of the tomato through the noise of the basil and onions. But they go one step further with trap cropping. They might plant a specific sacrificial plant, like nasturtiums, at the edge of the field. These plants are more attractive to aphids than the main crop. The pests flock to the sacrificial plant, leaving the main harvest untouched. You aren't fighting nature, you are redirecting it. 2. The architecture of the vertical guild. This is where the 3x faster harvest becomes a mathematical reality. In your garden, you are likely limited by the square footage of your soil. If you have 10 square meters, you plant 10 square meters of crops. Israeli farmers look at cubic volume, not square footage. They use a concept called vertical stacking. Think of it as a multi-story apartment building for plants. The anchors, the skyscrapers. Tall crops like corn, sunflowers, or trellised indeterminate tomatoes provide the structural bones of the bed. The climbers, the elevators. Legumes like pole beans or cucumbers use the anchors as free trellising. As we discussed, the beans pay for their rent by fixing nitrogen for the anchor. The mid-tier, the residents. Peppers, kale, or eggplants sit in the dappled shade provided by the taller plants, preventing them from bolting, going to seed, too early in the heat. The ground cover, the insulation. Low-growing plants like squash, clover, or strawberries act as a living mulch. They carpet the soil, preventing weed seeds from germinating and locking in moisture. In one 4x4 foot space, an Israeli grower can produce 5 different crops simultaneously. You would need 5 separate beds to achieve the same variety. By stacking functions, they aren't just saving space, they are creating a microclimate. The transpiration from the lower leaves keeps the upper leaves from wilting, and the structural support of the tall plants keeps the heavy fruit of the climbers off the ground, preventing rot. 3. Biological recruitment, the standing army. Finally, the Israeli model focuses on beneficial insect habitats. Instead of sterilizing the garden with pesticides, they intentionally plant insectaries, strips of flowering plants like alyssum or dill that bloom at different times of the year. These flowers attract a standing army of predatory insects, ladybugs, lacewings, and parasitic wasps. In a monoculture, these good guys leave as soon as the one crop stops flowering. In an Israeli polyculture, there is always something blooming. This means when a few aphids do manage to find your lettuce, the standing army is already living in the bed, ready to wipe them out before they can multiply. You aren't the police officer of your garden anymore. You are the general of an elite biological force. You have the theory, now you need the blueprint. Transitioning to an Israeli-style high-yield system doesn't require you to bulldoze your existing garden. It requires a strategic software update to how you plant and manage your space. This final stage is about the implementation path, a step-by-step guide to shifting your garden from a high-maintenance mode to a high-speed production mode in just 2 months. 1 week 1-2. Design your guilds and prepare the foundation. Stop thinking about buying seeds and start thinking about building teams. Choose a pilot area, perhaps one raised bed or a 2x2 meter patch. Identify your anchor. Choose a high-value tall crop, tomatoes or corn. Select your support. Pick a nitrogen-fixing climber, pole beans or peas. Choose your carpet. Select a ground cover living mulch, squash or spinach. The Israeli prep, instead of tilling the soil, which destroys the fungal networks we've discussed, apply a thin layer of high-quality compost and install a simple drip irrigation line. Constant, localized moisture is the fuel for the 3x speed boost. Number 2, week 3-4, the radical density planting. In a traditional garden, this is where you'd leave 30 centimeters of breathing room, empty dirt, between plants. In the Israeli model, you fill every inch. Interleaf planting? Sow your radishes and carrots in the same row. Plant your basil directly under the shadow of your tomato seedlings. Vertical infrastructure. Vertical infrastructure. If you aren't using corn as a trellis, set up your vertical supports now. Remember, we are growing up, not just out. The first, chop. If you have weeds popping up, don't pull them out by the roots. Chop them at the surface and leave them where they fall. You are already starting your first cycle of chop and drop fertility. Number 3, week 5 to 6, observation and biological management. By now, your confusion matrix should be working. You'll notice that while your neighbor's monoculture rows are being attacked by pests, your cluttered bed remains largely untouched. Monitor the pulse. Check your drip system. The soil should be consistently damp like a wrung-out sponge, never soaking and never bone dry. This consistency is what prevents growth stalls. Pruning for light. As your density increases, use the chop and drop method on the lower, older leaves of your tomatoes or squash. Drop them directly onto the soil. This opens up airflow, preventing fungus while feeding the soil microbes. 4, week 8 and beyond, the instant succession cycle. This is the moment of truth. You are now harvesting your first quick crops, radishes, lettuce, or spinach. The no-gap harvest. As soon as you harvest a radish, don't leave a hole. Immediately drop a new seed or a small transplant into that exact spot. The soil transformation. Dig a small hole to look at your soil. You'll see it's no longer dirt. It's dark, crumbly, and teeming with life. This living soil is now turbocharging your longer-term crops like peppers and tomatoes. Final summary. The result of the Israeli mindset. By following this path, you have effectively tripled your space by stacking crops vertically, tripled your fertility by keeping nutrients in a closed loop via chop and drop, tripled your speed by eliminating transplant shock and resource competition. You are no longer a servant to your garden, dragging a hose and fighting bugs. You are the designer of a high-performance ecosystem. You have moved from the factory age of gardening into the systems age. The desert farmers of Israel proved that scarcity is the mother of invention. You have proven that with the right design, your backyard can become the most productive hectare on Earth. The transition from a high-stress gardener to an ecosystem architect is more than just a change in technique. It is a shift in your relationship with the natural world. By adopting the Israeli mindset, you have stopped fighting the desert and started partnering with the incredible hidden intelligence of biology. Remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's resilience. There will be seasons when a specific gill doesn't perform as expected or a certain pest manages to bypass your confusion matrix. But in an integrated system, one failure never means total loss. When the beans struggle, the tomatoes thrive on the extra space. When the squash leaves fade, the soil below remains a rich, dark bank of future fertility. You are now part of a global movement of growers who realize that we don't need more land, more chemicals, or more backbreaking labor to feed our families and heal our planet. We simply need more design. So go out there and put your hands in the soil. Observe the way the basil leans toward the tomato. Notice the tiny predators patrolling your living mulch. Feel the heat rising from your chop and drop layers as they turn waste into life. You are no longer just growing vegetables. You are cultivating a legacy of abundance. Happy growing. The harvest of a lifetime is just 8 weeks away.